Emanators, the most powerful mortal beings in the cosmos and also the most dangerous. Because unlike Aeons, Emanators have personalities and motives that make them unpredictable forces of nature that everyone fears. And I believe we have just been introduced to the Emanators of the Remembrance. Initially, it was a popular belief that Memokeepers were Fuli's blessed individuals, but they weren't nearly up to snuff in terms of power. But now we have seen what a person with nearly unchecked power of the Remembrance path is capable of, and that person is Evernight. Because in the last video we talked about the Demiurge Matrix and the potential for a Stellaron to be the ally collaborating with Cyrene. But what is Cyrene? What is March 7th? And what is a pure child of Anasrava? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because that is precisely what I intend on focusing on today. Because I truly believe that these individuals are very much different from Memokeepers and are in fact Emanators of the Remembrance. And I hope you're ready, because this is Fuli's Fragmented Emanators Explained. Okay, so first off, we gotta talk about what a Memokeeper is, because they are fundamentally different from what a pure child of Anasrava is, but I can see a lot of people getting them confused. You see, Memokeepers are human pathstriders of the Remembrance, and they are dedicated to collecting memories. And Remembrance followers, regardless of faction, have one simple belief that everything else stems from. They believe that memories are eternal, and because of this, Fuli will be able to recreate the entirety of the universe with memories after it is destroyed. But it doesn't stop there, because they also do not see the present as something that exists. There is only memories, aka the past, and the future, which is everything that has yet to become the past. Similar to how Machiavelli sees everything as what has been explored and what has yet to be explored. It's like that. But here's where the Remembrance starts to look like a cult and less like a world-saving force, because they are so infatuated with memories that they ask Fuli to transform them into mimetic entities, so that they only exist in memory, making them immune to the negative effects of memoria and becoming nearly undetectable by all when they want to be, in exchange for having no physical body and technically being a ghost. So they basically die and then become a spirit memory being. And they do have a spirit body called a Dharmakaya that pretty much encapsulates them. That, of course, has the ability to shapeshift. That is what a Memokeeper is. What a pure child of Anasrava is, now that is something like this, but turned up to 10 with none of the drawbacks. Let me explain. Fuli is a strange Aeon, and it is easiest to explain them by saying that they themselves are a mimetic entity. But not only this, because for currently unknown reasons, this Aeon called Master of Anasrava can become physical and manifest themselves in crystalline form, but then they shatter into many different pieces and create children of Anasrava. And I guess I should explain what Anasrava means, because I've said this term enough, and it also just happens to be relevant. According to Wisdom Library, this term is from Buddhism and Jainism that pretty much revolves around purity and being uncontaminated by karma, which can lead to a person not being reborn, which is a good thing, because in Buddhism, to live is to suffer, and you constantly reincarnate until you are pure enough to free yourself from karmic debt and you stop the samsara, or the reincarnation cycle. And it is just now that I realize how relevant this is to Amphorius, because the entire purpose of us being here is to, one, get fuel for the Astral Express, for those of you who remember that, but now the reason is to free our friends from the reincarnation cycle of the endless suffering of them constantly suffering and dying. Because as of right now, to live for them is to suffer as they repeat their lives cursed by Nanook's golden blood, which, if you remember from the Saridra side of things, that is also referred to as sin, and sin and karma are kinda the same thing. So we are trying to purify the karma of these people created of sin with beings free from karma. Two of them. Real deep, right? It makes sense until you remember that Cyrene has golden blood too, and she is a walking contradiction. Anyway, being free from all karmic debt is what Anasrava means, so March and Cyrene are pure children of purity. And as much as Evernight hates to admit it, she does hold tight to aspects of the Remembrance, because the whole reason behind her cherishing March so dearly is because of her purity and innocence. And as for Cyrene, well, it doesn't get more pure-hearted than Elysia's XP now, does it? Willing to throw herself into the meat grinder millions of times just so that she can hold out for a pipe dream of someone answering her desperate, weak, and helpless prayer for salvation. So needless to say, yes, the pink-haired girls are pure of heart. But where did they come from? Well, from the database we can understand that when Fu Li becomes physical and shatters, these shards contain their children, which is the main reason why I call them Emanators, because they have portions of Fu Li's power directly given to them by manner of their birth. And they are part of what Fu Li was and thereby part Aeon, which is shockingly similar to Xipe's method of creating Emanators, because every single one of their many harmonic strings are different incarnations of Xipe. So yeah, both paths with deep connections to Memoria make their Emanators in similar ways. But March and Cyrene are not the only ones known to the universe. In fact, we learned from the database's latest update that unlike Memokeepers who seem to be strictly human, children of Remembrance can come in many different races, birthplaces, and even backgrounds. And they hardly even know each other because the shards spread to the far reaches of the cosmos. Also, they apparently are exclusively female with pink hair. Or maybe that's just because we only know 2 of them and they just happen to look similar. Sus detail there. Take that one with a grain of salt, I'm not sure about that. But the most fascinating thing we learn about this is that a child of Remembrance created the Garden of Recollection and guards some sort of remembrance secret. Now, this most likely means that they created the faction, the Garden of Recollection, not the pure Land of Recollection where memories are stored and where Fu Li hangs out. But still, the power and influence it would take to do this is incredible. This is something I thought Fu Li did themselves this whole time, because that means that this specific child of Remembrance somehow got Fu Li on board with creating Memokeepers. And simply communicating back and forth with an Aeon is unheard of. Not even Herta is confirmed to have done this. She talks to Noose, but Droid had left her on red. And as far as we know, Noose just gave her power and continued calculating. But this specific pure child of Anasrava is on something no one else is, and has accomplished something that shouldn't be possible. I guess talking to Aeons and Aeons responding and cooperating is possible, or I guess Memokeepers could have existed before the Garden, I'm not exactly sure. I would also say that Castellano was talking to Nanook and Nanook did technically respond, but I feel like challenging an Aeon to a fight and then getting a stare down isn't really cooperation or even a conversation. And I'm not even convinced that Aeons speak human languages, because just looking into Noose's thoughts left Patavia in a state where she could hardly recall anything at that point. So jury's still out on Aeon communication. Also, it is very much possible that this one child of Remembrance was just simply different. But speaking of being different, Fu Li's kids are very different from Memokeepers because they come with physical bodies and are in no way confined to the rules that if disobeyed can get you terminated if you are a Memokeeper. Because Evernight does whatever she wants and dares anyone to come try and stop her. And the gap between a Memokeeper's power and a Remembrance Emanators is explained best by Evernight saying that Black Swan's soul can be ripped from her Dharmakaya with a simple flick of her finger. Yeah, the gap in power is just that wide. And I think that Cyrene will be on that level very soon. Because unlike Evernight, who seems to have just been that strong from the jump, or maybe this evolution of power took place off screen or before we even met March, Cyrene had to evolve into her power over time. And instead of a Memokeeper going from human to mimetic entity, she kind of started as a mimetic entity and evolved into being human as she got stronger. And though we don't know Cyrene's entire backstory and how she got her power too well, we know that her ceremonial blade isn't normal, because this was never mentioned inside of Amphorius, but Lygus calls her blade a catalyst of remembrance, which is why she was able to store her consciousness inside of it and why it served such a large purpose in the story. This weapon is from beyond the sky. It's not from Amphorius, so she was always tied in with the remembrance and she just didn't know who she was. And it is very possible that she herself is somehow from beyond the sky, because neither was Elysia. Elysia was not from Earth. She was a Hersher being. She was born a Hersher. She was just like that. And now I think that Cyrene has fully come into her own now that her new form has finally manifested, or at least she has some idea, because not only was Evernight never able to contain her unlike Black Swan, but she also knows that the original Cyrene never faded away, meaning that even when fragmented or forced through cycles of death, she has endured it without any signs of wear, which is crazy. Because remember, Castellano was losing his mind by this point, even fresh off the memory transfer. But Cyrene, being who and what she is, never changed at all. Her morale took hits, but never her mental state. Because as a child of Fu Li, she has a natural immunity to the trials of time. She doesn't age. She can endlessly reset cycles because she herself never changes and never falters. And just like how March is split between March and Evernight, Cyrene has had millions of other selves. So these two are in fact very, very similar. They just have different backgrounds, as the database suggests. However, here is where things get weird, because now we gotta talk about Mythos. Yes, the Aeon that supposedly rose from Fu Li that Evernight can draw power from. Now, I don't know if this makes her a double Emanator or a Remembrance Emanator Enigmata Pathstrider, but she is using two different paths at once, which puts her on the list with the likes of Fei Xiao and Fantilia. But what we can glean from this is that Fu Li shards can do whatever they want and follow whatever path they feel like while still having Fu Li's power, and can even ascend to Aeonhood if the chance is ever given to them. Meaning that the children of Anasrava are not a faction, they are a species. Fu Li's progeny that, unlike Xipe's Emanators, can just do whatever they want, but have a natural desire to collect memories in one way or another. March still loves her pictures, and Cyrene loves her stories. And considering all of this, it makes perfect sense why evil Memokeepers would covet them, because they are everything Memokeepers are and more. Straight up, born better. But that is what happens when your parent is an Aeon and you are a cosmic Nepo baby. Because this is Fu Li's fragmented Emanators explained. I am rather convinced that Children of Remembrance or Children of Anasrava are in fact Emanators, and they do tick off all the boxes. The main box being getting power directly from an Aeon instead of merely being gazed at. Because we just learned that those are two different things. I believe that the whole reason why Evernight turned to Enigmata was because Children of Anasrava seem to start off kind of weak and then they get stronger over time, and maybe Memokeepers did something horrible to March in the meantime as she was weak, which is why Evernight erased that part of March's memory. I'm not exactly sure. Hopefully we get more answers soon, because I feel like there's still some gaps in our network of knowledge here. What do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.